Anyone who has grown up with a sibling knows how easily rivalries emerge. The desire of brothers and sisters to outdo each other is a practically universal situation that transcends any social class, culture, and era. In other words, everyone is subject to this rivalry, even the greatest monarchs in history. If humans are naturally prone to compete with their siblings, adding power, wealth, or fame further inflames this reality. In societies with hereditary governments, siblings have done terrible things to gain power. Although dynastic political families still exist, quarrels between siblings usually occur in corporate boardrooms or lawsuits. But throughout history, one thing is clear: family social relationships were complicated. We have made a list of 5 monarchs who fought with their brothers for the throne. Post your comment with who you think will be on this list. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you for your support. We begin this list in full force with one of the greatest rivalries between brothers, Pedro I and Miguel. You have probably heard about sibling rivalries, but did you know that the rivalry between Pedro and Miguel was one of the greatest in history? Throughout history, fights for the throne have always generated fratricidal wars between members of royal houses all over the world. But the dispute between Pedro I and his brother, Miguel, over the right of succession in Portugal after the death of King John VI in 1826 goes beyond typical bloody personal rivalry usually found when the crown is at stake. To defeat their brother opponent, Pedro I and Miguel fueled a civil war in Portugal that lasted 2 years between 1832 and 1834, mobilizing more than 80,000 men, including army soldiers loyal to Miguel and volunteers and mercenaries hired by Pedro I. Even with a contingent 10 times larger, Miguel lost. 4 years younger than Pedro I, Miguel spent much of his childhood and youth overshadowed by his brother when the royal family lived in Rio de Janeiro. There was a greater closeness between John VI and Pedro due to the fact that the eldest son was being groomed by his father to succeed him. Miguel was the protege of his mother, Carlota Joaquina. According to rumors of the time, this was due to the fact that Miguel was not John's legitimate son, but rather from a supposed affair of Carlota with the Marquis of Marialva, a diplomat of the Portuguese court, of whom the youngest son bore physical similarities. The brothers, who had different upbringings, different purposes, grew up with antagonistic ideas and had to solve these differences by fighting. During the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt, 305 to 30 BC, members of the Macedonian Greek ruling family usually married their own brothers for political and symbolic purposes. Often, these brothers/spouses had bloody conflicts to choose the ruler of Egypt. When Ptolemy XII died in 51 BC, Cleopatra VII and her brother, Ptolemy XIII Philopator, became co-rulers. Cleopatra, at the age of 18, was 8 years older than her brother and led Egyptian society for the next 4 years. At that time, Ptolemy came of age and, with the loyalty of the military, assumed power for himself. Cleopatra fled to Syria, where she met Julius Caesar. Both were to overthrow Ptolemy XIII. In a battle against the Romans led by Caesar and Cleopatra, Ptolemy was eventually drowned. Arsinoe, Cleopatra's sister, also participated in the conflict, taking control of the army and proclaiming herself queen. She was captured and initially given mercy until Cleopatra ordered her execution in 41 BC. After defeating her brother, Cleopatra became co-regent of Egypt, along with another younger brother, Ptolemy XIV. She later poisoned him to cede the place of co-regent to her son, and eventually make him the sole ruler. Henry VIII and his volatile reign spurred sibling rivalry even after his death. He spent his entire life and 6 marriages trying to produce male heirs. When he died in 1547, at the age of 55, his only legitimate son, Edward, whose mother was Jane Seymour, Henry's 3rd wife, became King Edward VI. Edward succumbed to tuberculosis 6 years into his rule. Since Henry had no male heirs or brothers, the line of succession continued through his daughters. The crown came into the hands of the eldest daughter, Mary Tudor, whose mother was Henry's first wife, the Spanish princess Catherine of Aragon. As a mother, Mary was a devout Catholic, which was a problem, since Henry had formally broken relations with Rome and established the Church of England in 1534. Mary succeeded Edward and became Mary I. Meanwhile, Henry's second eldest daughter was Elizabeth, the result of his relationship with his second wife, Anne Boleyn. Henry's marriage to Catherine was legally annulled, and Elizabeth's claim to the throne became stronger than Mary's. She was also a powerful Protestant rival to Mary's interests. Although the two got along well as children, even after the death of their rival mothers, they became increasingly conscious of their religions, and the rivalry grew. Shortly after Mary's coronation, she had Parliament declare the marriage between his mother and King Henry valid. In 1554, among many Protestant conspiracies against Mary, the Queen accused her half-sister of trying to overthrow the government. Mary nearly executed Elizabeth in the Tower of London before deciding to imprison her for a year in Woodstock Palace. In 1558, Mary died, leaving no heirs, and Elizabeth became Elizabeth I. Dynastic politics make sibling rivalries even worse. When Philip I, the soon-to-be Duke of Orleans, was born in 1640, he was the second son of King Louis XIII and second in line of succession to the throne after his older brother, also named Louis. The problem was that Philip had many attributes that would make him a good ruler. He was intelligent, outgoing, attractive, and charismatic. Under normal circumstances, the second in line of succession to the throne would hold positions in the military and government. But his insecure older brother prevented him from joining the French government. Known as the Sun King, Louis XIV kept his brother in the background. Philip earned the admiration of the French government after winning the Battle of Cassel as a lieutenant general. But Louis removed his brother from that position and prevented him from participating in other military conflicts where he could show his talent. Philip's personal style also contributed to the tension between the brothers. He was known to love wigs, jewelry, and to cross-dress at a time when this was quite outrageous. Louis hated this, as well as his brother's relationship with men. Last on the list is the rivalry of Richard the Lionheart and John without land. The right to be ruler of a nation has put brothers on a collision course numerous times throughout history. Richard and John, sons of King Henry II, were no exception. Richard, born in 1157, was the eldest. John, born in 1166, was Henry's fourth son, originally assigned to be a secondary role in the family dynasty. Being younger, John was not in a good position, and his father did not seem to consider him a future ruler, giving him the particularly cruel nickname John without land. However, his middle brothers Geoffrey and Henry died prematurely. The relationship between Henry II and Richard started to get strained, and John became important in Henry II's succession plans. He fueled conflict between his own sons and kept Richard fearful about succession to the throne. In the end, Henry II and Richard resumed their relationship. After the king's death, Richard assumed the throne in 1189. Before leaving to join the Third Crusade, he decided to banish his tumultuous brother from England for 3 years, but his mother talked him out of it. Richard should have followed his instinct, for as soon as he left, his younger brother plotted against Richard's regent. During Richard's 3-year absence, John controlled the kingdom. To add salt to the wound, while Richard was away, John tried several times to conspire with Philip Augustus, the King of France, to take the throne for himself, but was unsuccessful. When Richard finally returned to the kingdom, John fled to France. But Richard forgave his brother and even named him as heir instead of Geoffrey's eldest son. The historical narrative of this rivalry clearly supports one side. Richard is known as the brave Lionheart, while John is better known as the evil plotter of the Robin Hood legend.